All right, today is January 12, 2018. This is the meeting of the CSI implementation group for Kubernetes. Let's go to the agenda and get started. First on the agenda is a proposal to on how we can move to beta in Q1. I'm going to go ahead and move this to the end of the agenda. So if more people trickle in, we have more people to talk about it. So let's go to the next item, which Sergey brought up, which was about attributes on delete volume request and node unpublished request. So the issue that Sergey pointed out here is that if you're writing a volume plugin that needs, for example, credentials on the delete volume request or unpublished volume request, or it needs other information such as the IP or information that was normally passed into the volume attributes map on the create side, and on the publish side, that information is not available on the delete volume and unpublished side. How are we supposed to handle this? He is suggesting extending the CSI spec to add the volume attribute map to the unpublished request and the delete volume request. My response to this is that for credentials, at least, there's already a credentials field. It wasn't exactly complete by the time that we shipped alpha, but we were planning to work on that for beta. But Sergey's point is, well, it's not just credentials, it's also other fields that, other attributes that the plugin may need to be able to properly unmount, for example. So this is a discussion that we had back and forth a lot during the development of the CSI design. And what we decided was that we want the CO, in this case Kubernetes, to be able to unilaterally clean up orphaned mount points if it ever loses state, which if you've been working in the Kubernetes system for a while, you will know it happens not infrequently. And so instead of, if we lose the state and we have no way to be able to recover the extra information, then we'll end up with these dangling mount points that we can never clean up. So in the CSI spec, what we decided to do was push the burden onto the volume plugin to say the CO or Kubernetes is going to be able to unilaterally say, I want you to clean up this mount point, and you have to figure out how to do that. So what this means is that your plugin has to be able to persist some state, enough state to be able to do the cleanup as needed. This could be anything from writing a file next to the mount point or setting up your own, database, whatever makes sense for your volume plugin. It does increase the burden on the volume plugin, but it allows for the system to be more automated because when things go wonky, the CO can request cleanup and not get into a state where it's unable to clean up the underlying node. So Sergey, do you want to talk about that some more, or do you think we should move this to the community meeting?
Well, basically, yeah, if I could spend a couple of more minutes, that would be great.
Sure,
so, I mean, I understand your point perfectly, but this is more like a cleanup from the broken state. What I was referring more is to pass the same amount of information which is passed on the publish request. In this case, I mean, I can deal with the deleting volume or unpublishing it way more efficiently than basically trying to get information either from the file system, from a sys file system, or when I start querying API objects. It's going to be even slower. And then plugin automatically becomes non-CSI compliant because it's going to be a Kubernetes dependent. So that's my main concern. if we want to have a really like a CSI plugin, there should not be any CO dependent calls.
Yep.
And I think passing that information is a good step towards this goal. That's what I wanted to mention.
Yeah, no, I totally get that. I understand that by having this information passed in, it will allow certain volume plugins to run more efficiently, and it will actually reduce the overhead of writing a volume plugin. But the design decision that was made so far has been that we want to optimize for the ability for the CO to clean up in this error case. Whether that's the right decision or not can be debated. And I think the right forum to debate that would be the CSI community meeting. I think it would be worth bringing it up in that meeting and just chatting back and forth and see what folks think. The other challenge here is that the Kubernetes side of things also abides by the same philosophy. So if you look at the internal Kubernetes interface, the equivalent of volume attributes is the volume spec. And the volume spec is passed in on the create and attach and mount operations, but not on the detach or unmount operations for essentially the same reason. Because we want to take an arbitrary mount point that became orphaned and be able to say, oh, it belongs to this volume plugin, please clean it up. And it has been a challenge, even in the current Kubernetes entry volume plugins. Vlad can tell you all about that. He's written a few volume plugins. But I think in the end, it allows the CO to be more robust to failure. So I would prefer the added burden on the storage plugin and perhaps slightly less optimal volume plugin versus getting into a state where the CO is unable to keep the node clean, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does make sense, and I perfectly understand this point. So in this case, so what should I do? I should store the information I got from the storage class
Yep.
somewhere, and
Yep.
then when the plugin comes up, then should I try to kind of replay whatever information
So assume
got
that
stored
your volume plugin. Sorry,
to restore the. No, that's it. So I mean, what should I do? Like when the plugin comes up,
yeah.
I have a folder for a plugin dependent folder.
Right.
And then I will probably store like a file, files with the volume ID.
Precisely. So you come up with some mechanism to serialize the information that you absolutely critically need on the unmount side, and you store that along with the mount point. And then on the unmount side, you should be able to read when you get one of these requests, you have to match up the volume name, make sure all the information matches, and then use that to fetch that file, read the extra information that you need, and then carry on the operation. And in fact, if you look at the CSI in-tree volume plugin that Vlad wrote last quarter, it does exactly this on the Kubernetes in-tree side of things.
Okay, that makes perfect sense. Yeah, I'll look into it. But my question was a little bit more. Let's say plugin comes up. It checks the folder and it sees bunch of files there already.
Yep.
So what should I do? Clean them up?
No, you should not clean them up. You should wait for from a request from the CO to clean it up. The CO is responsible for figuring out what should and should not be mounted. It's possible that your plugin crashed and came back up, but that the workloads that were using these mount points are still up and running and happy. So never ever go in and unilaterally start cleaning up. Wait for a signal from the CO to tell you that it's okay to go ahead and clean up.
Okay, got it. Perfect. And the last point for the secret. I read the spec, and basically at some point it was mentioned that secret should not be I think it should not be transferred or stored somewhere.
Yeah.
In this case, do you think it would be safe then to pass that secret in the gRPC between the, let's say, between the CEO and the plugin?
Yeah, that's a very good question. I think it should be safe. There are 2 points at which this conversion will happen. Actually, 3 points between the external attacher and the volume plugin, which is a Unix domain socket inside the container, between the external attacher and the CSI plugin, which is also the Unix domain socket, and then finally between the kubelet and the CSI driver, which is also a Unix domain socket. The assumption here is that the Unix domain socket is safe and secure. And with that assumption, I think you can assume that transferring over your credentials is an okay operation. If for some reason you do believe that this is insufficient and you don't feel safe trusting the Unix domain socket to transfer unencrypted credentials over, then it's up to you on how you can make it more secure. One option is that you could just pass in the secret reference and then dereference it inside your volume plugin. But like you said, it will make your CSI driver non-portable. That is an option that you have. It's not, recommended, but it's also, if it's a trade-off. If you prefer it to be more, secure, then that's something that you can consider. But as far as we understand, the Unix domain sockets should be sufficiently secure to transfer credentials over.
All right, got it. Thank you.
No problem. Thank you for bringing this up. I think it's an important question that a lot of people will run into. Okay, so next one is by Vlad. Yuquan has, Yuquan. Am I pronouncing your name correctly, Nick? Or do you prefer Nick?
Yeah, Yuchen.
Yuchen, okay.
Yeah.
Cool. Okay, so Yuchen has volunteered to work on the FS type issue.
Yeah, actually, I have already sent a PR for entry Kubernetes changes. So that could you please take a look when you get a chance?
Perfect. Can you post the volume or the PR in this document? And then we'll take a look at it.
In my PR, I have referenced the issue. You can find my PR in the issue. Okay,
perfect. I will copy that over then. Thank you for that. You are very, very quick on all of this. This is great. So Yuquan has already, sorry, what's that?
Yeah, when it gets merged, I will update the external components too.
Okay. Okay, thank you very much. And it looks like Yuquan has a bunch of green things already completed. So that's awesome. Yuchen, apologies.
Thank you.
Next up is, let's review the bugs that we've been tracking. One was, Vlad, you're breaking up. All right, let's keep moving. This one is opened by Luis. The contents of the extra Docker, extras Dockers are used to build a container because the output, a container that is only 3 megabytes to 3 is done by root need to be deleted. So I don't know what the context of this is. Does anybody know what the context is? Luis, you're there. Luis, are you there?
Yes, I am here. I've been muted.
Okay.
and then my mute button got overridden by my Fedora, so it took me a while. Anyway, I saw quite a few PRs for the makefile, and and the makefile also has APRs to work on the containers for GCR. So I wanted to specify that the Dockerfile that's on the root creates a massive container that takes forever to download in E2E. And sometimes E2E fails because it takes too long. So instead, I had to forcefully create the one in extras Docker to use Alpine. So that's what I'm saying is we should delete the one in the root, and we should use the extras Docker because it's like a little shell script. It does a build container and then an exposure container. So that's what I'm trying to say. The PRs, instant PRs is not here yet. There's so.
Luis, actually, I when I tried to use that Docker from the extras, I came across an interesting issue. So the binary I built failed to start, but as soon as I changed Alpine to CentOS, my binary was perfectly starting inside of the container. So, I mean, was it something I was doing wrong, or I mean, can you?
I don't know. Maybe because this is used for E2E, and I use it all the time to test. So definitely keep an eye on that. I want to continue using this one, but if it happens again, definitely bring it up.
Okay.
So the action item here is what exactly?
That the Docker file in the root should be deleted.
The Docker file in the root of external provisioner?
That's correct.
Okay. So let's double check that the Alpine one works in the case that Sergey pointed out.
It's used in E2E tests.
Okay. Okay. I just want to make sure that whatever issue, it's a different environment issue, whatever it is, we figured that out. Other than that, seems reasonable to me.
Okay. Yeah, so it's no big deal.
Okay. Cool.
Did we already cover status? I kind of missed the beginning.
No, we've just been going over a couple issues.
I'll wait then.
Next up is version message incorrectly prints the...
That's me too. I'm going to take care of that today, actually.
Oh, sounds good. And then finally, the volume info issue. Sergey, do you have any updates on this?
Yeah, it's been merged, and so it's fixed.
Perfect. So the issue was in external provisioner?
External attacher.
External attacher, okay.
Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you very much for following up on that. Next up...
Is the mic working now? Can you guys hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you, Luis. Or sorry, Vlad.
Hi. Okay, thanks.
Okay, so next up is my proposal for moving to beta in Q1. I think what we discussed at the beginning of this quarter was we have a lot of work and we're not sure whether we're going to be able to complete all of it to be able to hit beta. What I realized was that a lot of the big things that are missing were things like block volume support, credentials, and things that add on top of the core. So what I would like to propose is we move the core CSI volume source object and the volume attachment object that we introduced into beta. And that way we can unblock folks who are trying to implement volume plugin, the CSI volume drivers, because basically nobody wants to implement it if it's in alpha, or you can't really use it because you have to opt in and enable it. So we go ahead and move the core things into beta this quarter, and then we basically decouple these extra features on top. So while the core can move to beta, if some of the newer features on top of it are not ready, we can call those features alpha and gate them accordingly.
I am 100% on that. I think it's a great idea. One of the biggest issues, like I've mentioned before, is trying to enable CSI support in a clustered Kubernetes is a pain. So,
and the realistic thing about this is that CSI is no longer just one project. It is going to be a bunch of smaller things, right? When we start to add snapshots on top of it, when we start to add resizing on top, all these things are going to be separate, independent features and projects. So if we couple all of it together and try to move in lockstep, we're going to move very, very slowly, and we're not going to be able to achieve beta for a very long time. So instead, what we need to do is make sure that we take the core things that we agree on, and it seems like we're going in the right direction, and start pushing those forward. And then the additional features on top, we can look at feature by feature basis and move them through their own alpha, beta, GA process.
So I agree. And the only thing that I would like as an output of this is a page, a wiki document, I don't care what it is, that has everything that's a project and its status. Because what we're going to have is customers saying, what, this small project is at alpha, this one is at beta, this one, but we just want to get a single page of the entire view of CSI world. So.
Yep, that is completely fair. So the tasks that we're going to need to do here, if we go down this path, is move volume attachment API to beta this quarter. Move CSI volume source API to beta. Update flag gates.
You're gonna need more propagation too.
Yeah, and that we already have.
Okay. But it's alpha right now.
It is alpha, but it's planned to be moved to beta this quarter.
Okay, good.
It's the.
I was wondering if the secret will become a part of the core of CSI, because I mean, from my point of view, it's kind of an important piece.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. But CSI credentials is on the list of tasks that we are planning to tackle this quarter. Yeah, how it goes. Okay, so that means we have to add these items to the list below. Do we have folks volunteering to work on this? So moving volume attachment API to beta, I can take this on.
What does that mean?
Sorry, what's that, Vlad?
Oh, I was saying, what does that mean? What does that entail?
So basically what this means is adding in a so currently the volume attachment is in the storage v1 alpha 1 group, and we would need to basically copy it into the v1 beta 1 group, and then auto-generated files and things like that.
Okay. Yeah, because we have to do this. Okay, so you have that for CSI. Now, before we move CSI volume source, I think there's at least one PR out there concerning adding FS type.
Yep.
So we would want to do that before I obviously put it in beta.
Yes, that's fine. And so CSI volume source is a little weird because it was introduced in the V1 group. It wasn't added in the V1 alpha 1 group because all the volume plugins basically just get added directly to V1. And the way that we promote them from alpha, beta to GA is basically just comments or not even that sometimes. It's a little bit of a flawed process. So I don't think there's actually any work required for number 2 here other than making sure we don't have any comments that are calling it alpha and removing the flag gates.
Okay.
And for number 1, it's actually copying the API, making it available in a second place, and then updating all the code references to be able to support it properly. So number 1 is actual, like, a big piece of work. Number 2 and 3 are should be pretty small.
So going back to kind of the recalibration of focusing on beta, part of what we talked about is, well, we have a list of tasks.
Yep.
Listed for below. Are we going to recalibrate that to kind of align with what you just said as far as the core and then what's not core? Because that way, things that are not core, we probably can
deprioritize.
kind of put brakes on them.
Yeah, that's a good point. And yes, we should do that. And in fact, we could do it next. Just go through these items and figure out what is required for beta and
right.
what is not. Because
then that way we can recalibrate our own task lists.
Yeah, that's fair.
Yeah. Okay, cool.
So if there are no volunteers, then I can sign up for this. Going once.
I'll help out with the CSI volume source.
Okay.
Since I know where the dead bodies are, so I can I'll help out.
Okay. Anybody want to help with the creating a status project page? Luis, maybe?
Sure. You can put me on that.
Cool.
We can decide where that can go later.
Yeah. All right, cool. So I will go in and clean this up and add it to the task list below. So next up is any updates, and then we'll go in and reprioritize. And in fact, we can deprioritize offline if anybody needs to jump off. We're at the end of the meeting right now.
Yeah, that's just on the updates. I was just going to say that I have all cleaned up the projects in GitHub for both the CSI Sanity and the other stuff that I was working on. So people can go into those projects and just start picking things off. And I think I shared it also with Yushen this morning. So you can go ahead and look at that too.
Cool.
Yeah, I will find some tasks I can tick.
Yeah, if you want to.
Yeah.
Thank you.
All right, sounds good. Looks like Vlad.
So that PR is, yeah, that's the PR for updating or changing instead of polling to do using the watcher.
Okay.
I've already gone through it.
Okay.
Pretty good, actually. We just need to. I just need to have a LGTM or.
Cool. I'll take a look at that.
Yeah.
Cool. All right. So anybody who wants to drop off at this point, feel free. We're just going to go through and try to reprioritize this list based on what is critical for beta and what is not. P0 move mount propagation to beta. I think that is still critical. Next up is block device support in CSI. I don't think that's as critical anymore. We can decouple it. We can move the core to beta and then add in support for block.
Agreed. That one even can continue as whatever state is for block storage in Kubernetes. So
yeah. So I'll mark that P2 and then that's fine. P0 make volume attributes first class. I think this is still a critical thing we should do for beta. Should be fairly straightforward. P1 node authorizer volume attachment access. I think P1 still makes sense here. This is a security thing. We should make sure that we do the right things here. Then we have deploying external components to GCR. I'd mark this as P2, and in fact, I'll based on my conversations with Jan, he pointed out this is not something that even needs to be tracked in the open source side of things. So, all right, we'll leave it on this list and move it to the bottom. P1 topology. I think we can move forward without topology to beta. It just means that when topology comes out, we can add it in. So I would be okay bumping this down to P2. CSI credentials, I think, are important. Based on what Sergey said, I think a lot of volume plugins may have similar requirements to be able to pass in credentials on create, mount, and attach calls. So that's something we should focus on this quarter. Registration of a socket with kubelet, I think that's important to get right, so let's leave that as P1. And then specifying a file system, that's critical functionality, keep it as P1. Understand the design to handle ephemeral volumes, I'd put that down to P2. We can reassess as needed. Also because we have nobody working on it at the moment. Improve CSI version handling. I think that's important. We're going to get more and more CSI versions, and we need to make sure that we don't break when a new version is released or anything like that. So leave that as P1. If CSI implements mount device, implement it. That makes sense as P2. See if we can change Kubernetes allowed privilege flag. It's fine as P2. Passing in supplemental groups as P2 makes sense. And then UChen has already updated the dependencies, so that's great. In terms of changes to the CSI spec, credentials is still P0. Topology, I think getting topology into the CSI spec is important, so that even if we get it in this quarter, we can work on it next quarter. So I'd leave that as P1. Mount devices, P2 is fine. If we get it, it will be very nice. If we don't, it's not that big a deal. Allow volume drivers to not implement the controller, also nice to have, but not critical. P0 unit testing framework validation for CSI drivers. I would actually rank this lower now than some of the, for example, build system for, let's see, what do we have here? The external components. I think the external components are...
I still would think we need some type of testing for...
I agree we need some type of testing.
Okay. I'll follow
I would prioritize the external components over the drivers, if that makes sense.
Yes. Yeah, that's exactly what I was going to say. I agree.
Okay. So external components should probe prior to storage ops. I'm fine leaving that P1. Do we have a task capturing, adding in automation for the external components? Oh,
yeah, it's a Travis one.
This guy, okay.
Yeah.
So I'd say make that a P0.
I'm going to try to have done by Wednesday of next week. Should be done by then.
Perfect. And then do we have a task for adding tests for these external sidecar containers?
I can work with David. I think he was starting to work a little bit on that while we're creating the make files and things like that. So maybe him and I can...
Let's add that as a P1.
Work on that. I'll create tasks from the project for that.
Yeah, that would be perfect.
I know that Jan's external attacher has a lot of unit tests. So.
Yeah. Unit test, if we can get some end-to-end tests or something, just let's add more tests here to make sure that we're confident and don't cause regressions as we poke around in this code.
Yep. Yeah, I completely agree. It's actually people are starting to leverage it, so we need more testing on it.
Yeah. So let's say David.
Yeah, I'll lead that though.
Cool. External components should probe prior to storage ops. We'll leave that. Automated build system for drivers, P2 makes sense. CSI driver should not depend, P2. End-to-end test for CSI drivers, P2. Docs to write new drivers, P2. Revisit.
Just a quick thing. The E2E test for CSI drivers, I think should be removed completely.
Okay. I'm okay with that.
I don't think we'll ever get to it.
Okay, we'll go ahead and cross that off the list then. Docs to write new drivers makes sense. Revisit CSI on Kubernetes IO. Fine as P2. Update spec dependencies, which I think UChen is almost done with. I think there was one PR that left was remaining. New CSI drivers. P2. I might bump this up to P1 or P0. It looks like we might need it earlier, but we can reassess as we go.
I thought the AWS Amazon people were going to do it, the AWS one.
Sorry, which people?
The Amazon team.
I haven't heard anything. That would be super awesome if they were.
I thought they said that at the KubeCon.
KubeCon.
I can find out. I'm gonna try to find
I'm
out.
not sure.
Yeah, I think yeah, somebody mentioned in the last KubeCon that's what they were going to do, right?
Yeah, I thought that too.
Yeah.
That would be awesome if they're able to do that. That would be wonderful.
Yeah. It was at the that AMA session. The guy showed up and said, "Yeah, we're taking that over."
Yeah.
Let's see if anybody pops in and says anything to us or the storage SIG in this quarter, and if they don't, then for planning for Q2, we can go and rattle some cages and see if we can
find
somebody from Amazon to pick it up.
Yep.
Also, Sergey, if you want the Ceph driver and the list, just send the PR for the documentation.
Oh, you mean as a example driver? Because I mean, I was hoping it to be more production grade.
No, there's a list. There's a table of production grade drivers.
Oh, okay. I wasn't aware of that. Sure, yeah, I'll do that when it's ready. Yeah, absolutely. Thank you.
Awesome. I think that's it. Vlad, are you okay on the priorities? I don't think it changes much on your plate, though.
Yeah, I don't think it changed much. I think the stuff obviously bugs and some of the stuff. Yeah, I think we're good. I was looking. I kind of was following what you were doing. Some of the P1 stayed P1, which is great.
Okay.
Yeah, I think we're good.
Cool. All right, folks. I think that's pretty much it from my end. Anything anybody wants to talk about?
I'm looking at like mid-screen right here where it says specify out. You just move it. Where was it? Specifying. Yeah, that guy. Should who's doing this?
Yu-Chen.
Okay, yeah.
Okay, yeah. Let's reassign that. That's a good point. Let's see right here. Oh. All right.
Cool.
Since I'm kind of stuck until the secrets gets implemented, I mean, I would be interested if there are some subtasks for P1 CSI credentials. If I could help to move it forward faster, I would definitely do that.
Cool. That would be great.
There you go.
So, talking about CSI credential, are we talking volume credentials?
So CSI credentials, there's two sets of credentials as I see it. One is for the volume plugin to talk to the backend control plane.
To the backend, right?
Those are completely independent of the CSI spec because those can be injected in at deployment time by whatever makes sense for the deployment environment. In Kubernetes, that's Kubernetes secrets that can be exposed as volumes or environment variables. So that.
But that's not going to end up in the PV, right?
That's like not going to be in the PV. It'll be like when you deploy your CSI driver pod.
Pods, right? Okay.
You can add in, this secret must be exposed as an environment variable or whatever inside this container at this spot.
Right.
And so that handles if your plugin has like a general credential that it has to authenticate with or authorize with the backend, you can inject that there. There's a second set of credentials which are possibly required by some volume plugins on every mutate operation. So when you create a volume or when you attach a volume or mount it, some volume plugins need credentials on those calls. Today, the CSI spec has the ability to pass in user credentials at that point. We didn't add that into alpha, one, because we didn't have time, and two, because there were some issues with the way that that's defined in the CSI spec in terms of it's unclear, like the way that the spec defines it, it's user credentials in all three cases. But for example, you could have a single volume that is mounted in by two different workloads. So it only has a single controller publish call. Which set of credentials are you going to use on that call?
Right.
So we need to go in and clean up the spec to make that much more clear and much more obvious. And then once the spec is updated, then we can update the Kubernetes side of things to go ahead and call through and pass the right things to the right places, as well as expose secrets in the right places on the Kubernetes side of things.
Guys, I need to step off.
Okay, no problem. Thanks, Luis.
All right.
Take care, guys.
Does that make sense, Vlad?
Oh yeah, it does. I'm just concerned that because I kind of remember that discussion and putting the burden on the CO. But it makes sense. We'll discuss it again, obviously, when we get there.
Yeah.
So there's no need to rehash it again here.
Okay. And Sergey, I think the first step here is going to be updating the CSI spec to clean up the user credentials in all of these places. The thing that we need to keep in mind is that basically the life cycle. So for node publish, essentially that's like credential for the workload, but node controller publish is credentials for the volume, essentially, like authorizing the volume to attach to a particular node. And then finally, create is an authorization to be able to create a volume at all. It's possible that all three credentials could be the same, but we need to word things accordingly.
Okay, all right. I mean, I guess we could have an offline chat a little bit, so I can get up to speed faster.
Yeah. Okay. Sounds good.
Hey, Saad.
Yes.
Since we want to change spec, can we add FS group support in this quarter?
I think FS group support already exists in the spec. By FS group you mean not FS type. You're talking about FS group. Okay.
Yeah, FS group.
FS group, there was lots of talk about doing it. If you go to container storage interface spec and look for issues. Let's look at Unix. There was an issue opened that was about that.
I guess that would make Windows people not very happy because I mean they don't have a FS group.
Yeah, so that was one of the big reasons why we punted on it. We want the CSI spec to not leak implementation specific details, and FS group and users are a Linux specific construct, and we need to figure out a way to be able to handle that in a more general manner. So as far as I'm concerned, I think we're going to punt this to post beta before GA. Try to see how it fits in. I don't think it's super critical for us yet. But if you disagree, please feel free to add to the discussion or to ping me directly.
I don't disagree, but I do have a kind of a question. How is it done to? I mean, the Windows concern is valid, but how is that handled today?
I think the way that it works in Kubernetes is we have code outside of the volume plugin which handles FS group and supplemental groups generically. And then that code, I I'm not certain, but I believe has like a Windows variant somehow. I'm not sure. Windows support just went to beta, which I was surprised to hear, considering how much of the volume interface exists, and I'm not sure how it maps to Windows. So actually,
Right.
I'm not sure.
Cool.
Okay, anything else? All right, cool. We'll reconvene on Monday then. Have a good weekend.
Awesome. Thank you, man.
All right, take
Thanks.
care.
Bye.
Bye.